Hello, Internet, and thank you for joining me today. So, last week, Ryan Reynolds melted my icy heart in Deadpool and Wolverine. So, if you'd like some unbiased thoughts on the movie that just came out, you're going to have to go somewhere else because I loved this movie. It is my favorite movie of this year so far, which really isn't saying too much because, this year and I haven't been out a whole lot. But yeah, so I'd like to talk about this for a little bit. So for a really quick, fast 10-second style review, again, I think it's great, but I can understand why some people wouldn't like it. The movie is really just built around references. You have to be able to keep up with all of these references that keep being made, and you have to have kind of a lot of lore knowledge to get the most out of it. I mean, I'm fairly caught up on everything, and I don't think I got them all. Now, in saying all that, I do have to mention that there is a story beneath all of those references that you can definitely follow, even if you're not caught up. So you still should go see this movie because it's great. The action is phenomenal. The story is actually very heartfelt when you can get past all the references to it. And the acting is just off the charts amazing. Really, I cannot praise the acting in this movie enough. Now, in saying all of that, I do just feel like Disney is going to get the wrong message. And I think that the message they're going to take away from this is nostalgia baiting, and references like this equate immediately to cash. And that's simply the wrong idea. The acting and the story around those references, tying them all together, is really what sold this movie for me. But again, I have to say something else on top of that I've heard around the internet, and that is that some people on the internet are taking this the wrong way. I'm sure if you've been around the YouTuber movie space, you've definitely heard of DEI or something to that effect, and there were some behind the scenes stuff keeping a lot of that out of this movie. And I mean, sure, there's not as much of that in, but that's not what makes the movie great. And in order to tell you more about why it's great, I'd like to move into spoiler territory. So without further ado, spoilers. So to start off this section of the video here, holy fuck, I was not expecting Cassandra Nova to be here. She was a welcome surprise, which, just to give you some background around me, I don't read a ton of comic books. I read a decent amount, a fair amount, if you will, but I'm not overly familiar with Cassandra Nova, but I knew of her existence at least. And it was very surprising that she turned out to be the antagonist, more or less, in this movie, because the TVA, if you've seen the movie, you understand who the TVA is, but the TVA does not present a crazy amount of antagonistic energy in this story. So her, as our main protagonist, was quite the surprise. And here's the thing, she just works in this story. She works as like this super deep cut reference that not a lot of people are going to get, but the people that do get it are definitely going to enjoy it. And she works as, female representation. Here's that DEI that we were talking about earlier. But, she works in this story, but she's also a super threatening villain. Like, she's super powerful. And that kind of goes against the story as a whole, I feel like, because she's a bit too powerful. She's presents too much of a threat. Like, no one can really go up against her unless there's this certain thing. And not to get too spoilery, because I do want people to go see this movie, but when they finally seem like they have her on the ropes, They just don't do it, which is actually a very good character moment for, Logan, Wolverine, or at least this version of Wolverine. But it still means that we have this super powerful, character here that we have to deal with because she is still the antagonist after they, spare her more or less. And really, I want to bring up Cassandra Nova specifically because I feel like she is the one that Disney Marvel should be learning from. You see characters like Captain Marvel, She-Hulk, and to a much lesser extent, Echo. They are these characters that they basically just exist to say men bad. And nothing else. They don't say anything beyond that. But Cassandra Nova, as a character, first of all, she never mentions anything like that, which is actually quite restrained because in this Deadpool movie where the fourth wall is made of nothing, candy glass, and she could have easily turned to the camera and said, men bad, but she doesn't do that. She has her own motivations, her own character, her own arc to go off of. So she presents a lot more interesting of a character than just that. But the thing about it is that both these villains kind of suck for this story because Deadpool's not known for being, super duper powerful. So the idea that he's going to fight Cassandra Nova, this Omega level mutant, is a bit preposterous. So he has to, get a bunch of reference characters in and do the dirty work for him, which works in the movie. But it's also like it takes away from the TVA as villains because they can't do anything about her. She's too powerful for them. And that just kind of leads to questions about, why is any of this happening when Cassandra Nova hypothetically could have done this at any time and just didn't. And the other thing that really kind of ruins the TVA for me is that they can't really get a hold of Deadpool. Like there's a significant chunk of the movie where the TVA and the main threat of the timeline evaporating just isn't all that present in the movie as like a theme or anything. But a little bit later, I'll get to that. But the TVA really just doesn't come off as super threatening. And that was kind of a problem for me because they should be more threatening. They should be more present in the story. But the villains not being all that threatening in the grand scheme of things and plot armor and things, that's a discussion for a different time. But there is the glaring problem of all of these characters showing up, like Johnny Storm, like Elektra, like Blade, all of them showing up really does kind of dogpile onto the story. And it's not like that big of a story. It does what I've wanted movies to do in the Marvel Universe for a long time. And that is present a story that's simple but well told. And the story of, Deadpool finding his place in essentially the world and Logan getting over being a failure as, a superhero, that is much more important. And I wish they had focused just a tad bit more on that. But I feel like we got enough for me to say that it's a very good movie. And honestly, if this were a different movie, all of the fan service and all of the references and, deep cuts and random characters that show up for little justified reason, really flimsy reasoning for all of these characters to show up. But that's all supposed to be, so that when all the fanboys are sitting in the theater, they just shoot hot jets of cum everywhere. And you know what? I'm no exception. I was doing that exact thing. I was literally DiCaprio in that one movie where he's pointing at the screen. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Good call leaving that in the comments so that I didn't have to stop recording to look that up. So yeah, this movie was almost targeted at me with all of the references. I grew up when all of these movies were coming out, and that's all we had for superhero movies pre MCU. So this could not be more directed at me and my generation than it is currently. But I feel like I've been negative for a large portion of the spoiler part, and I had to get it out of the way because I love this movie so much. I think again, only Deadpool could really bring all of these characters back in and put them all in one movie, which is what we wanted back then. Back when Blade was still good and we didn't know that Wesley Snipes was a massive douchebag. And we didn't get Daredevil, but, we all thought that these people should just get thrown together in a movie and, see what happens. I'm kind of disappointed they didn't get Nick Cage as Ghost Rider. That would have been the cherry on top. But, we got a really good movie regardless of that. And again, I have to go back to the performances of this movie. I was really concerned that they were going to disrespect Logan because Logan is one of my favorite movies I've ever seen. It hit me right at the perfect time when it came out. So when they initially announced this Deadpool and Wolverine with Hugh Jackman, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they pulled Hugh Jackman back into this because Hugh Jackman is a phenomenal actor and he did amazing in Logan, but the send off was just perfect in Logan. And within that first scene, they did do a good job of keeping that canonical. So they were able to keep Logan as itself and then tell a different story with the same characters. And they even tied it back in because Laura's there with him in, I don't remember what they called it, the Wasteland or whatever, the place where Cassandra Nova is God. But they got Laura in there and they even made it emotional. And I think only those two actors could have made that emotional and made that what it was because in all honesty, that Wolverine has no ties to Laura. But, Hugh Jackman is just so good. He can make that work with his character who is still damaged, just a different kind of damaged. But I really can't gush enough about all these performances because even Peter, the guy who plays Peter, I should say, does a phenomenal job. He continues to hit every single line he's given and just really sell his performance. And of course, Ryan Reynolds is great. Everyone else in it is great. I'm not going to keep going on and on about that. I'm going to just go ahead and move on. So I watch a lot of YouTube, and I've been over the past week listening to a lot of people talk about Wolverine and Deadpool, and a lot of people seem to say that the second act kind of drags, and I definitely understand where they're coming from, but I respectfully disagree. I don't think it drags. It's just that the first act is such a joke a minute action all the time type of act, and the movie just speeds up so quickly and is so dense with all of that in the beginning that whenever we get to the second act and it's time to slow down and we're analyzing the characters and there is a bunch of craziness, I'm not going to deny that all the references do kind of get in the way, but there's still tons of stuff. There's never a moment where they are just stagnant or to pull from Last Jedi, they're just doing useless crap. Like in the second act of Last Jedi, everything that happens on the casino planet doesn't matter by the end. There's not that in this movie, and that's what I feel like people were criticizing, was that the second act really didn't matter and you could just cut all that out and condense it down to, go from the first act and then have a little connecting tissue to the second act or the third act rather. But that's not the case at all. There's so much important character building and character growth. I mean, the whole hero's journey basically takes place in the second act with a amazing climax at in that third act, fight scene. Like, they do build up to it so that they can do a bunch of fireworks and a huge fight scene, which is really impressive. It seems like they used a lot of, actual practical effects. So it points to them for that. And they really paid off everything that was built up. And I think without that second act, quote unquote, lull, which is basically just, if the TikTok generation doesn't get it, it's actually called character development. Now, I just want to double back really quick and acknowledge that I don't think anyone is calling this movie bad or as bad as The Last Jedi or anything like that. I just used it as a point of reference there. And everyone seems to be fairly positive about this movie, even if you don't love it like I love it. And that's why I'm worried that Disney's going to be sent the wrong message for this movie, because it is so, reference heavy. It is so self-referential and quote unquote funny. Humor is subjective, so I put in quotes around it. But they might try to replicate this type of movie, and I don't think that that's the direction they need to be going in. They need to be going in the direction of variety. This does breathe a breath of fresh air into it. And honestly, I think they are going in the right direction with the preview that I've seen of Captain America, the new one. I do think that they are going in that variety type direction, where that seems more of like an action thriller type movie, political thriller or whatever. Which, you know what, I would be on board for. I'm okay with it. I know not everyone's on board with it, and I totally understand why, but I haven't seen Falcon and Winter Soldier, so I don't have enough context to be down on it just yet. So originally, I wanted to talk a lot more about specific references and get into a lot of the weeds of why this movie's so good, but I did want to kind of cut it short because, longer form videos get absolutely destroyed on my channel. They get like no views, so I wanted to try to keep this pretty short. So if you like this, give it a like, and if I get to 10 likes, I'll do a deeper dive into this movie specifically, probably when it comes out on home video or whatever we're calling it these days. But once that comes out, if this video gets as many likes as I want, then we will go from there. But man, I just feel dirty doing that. I see a lot of YouTubers doing it, but I feel dirty doing that. Anyway, I guess like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.